Welcome back to the Everyday Apologist. I'm Kevin Robert Jarvis. This video is going to be on chapter 3 from my book, From One Father to Another, What Becoming a Father Taught Me About God. The link to the book will be below in the description if you're interested. So chapter 3, this chapter is titled, Why Not Limit Our Freedom? And in the previous videos, we talked a lot about free will and do we have free will? And I think as best as I can in a 7 to 10 minute video, I made the case that I do believe we have free will and that God gave us that free will in order for us to experience love and virtue and things like that. The question I think that always comes up, and for me too, is why not limit our freedom though? Maybe we have a little too much freedom. When we look around at the world and all the things that are happening in the world, from wars to crimes, from rape to murder to you name it, the crimes are just, there's so many of them. And you think, why not just limit that freedom? And I can think of a few examples, from my own life with my children. And so there was one day, and I think Luke was about 3.5 years old. He was out on the front lawn and he was playing with a little buddy. And for some reason I saw him pick up the stick and it looks like he was going to go give it to his little buddy there. So I run out, I grab the stick from him, like, no, you can't just start hitting your friends with sticks. And obviously I just took it away from him. Another day I heard some arguing coming from my older son's room, and I go into the room and him and Kara are up on the bed and they're pushing each other, as hard as they can, and they're arguing because some hide and seek game went sideways. And so I intervene and split them up so that, they wouldn't harm each other or themselves. Stop my kids from pushing each other down the stairs, running out into the road, putting things down their throats and their noses and into light sockets, and you name it. And in all of these situations, I'm technically, momentarily intervening in their free will. I'm taking their free will away from them, not allowing them to do what they want to do, and I'm taking it away from them. And I always wondered, well, can't God do the same? Or does he do the same? And the only kind of answer I've come up with is that he does, but through our conscience. God tries to prevent these things through our conscience. So he's kind of taken the sticks out of our hands or trying to take the sticks out of our hands, whether it's guns, knives, sticks, whatever it is, by working through our conscience. And I guess that always bugged me a little. And I always thought, is that enough? Like, is that enough? Because as a parent here on earth, as a human father, I can literally take the stick out of my son or daughter's hand. I can, convince someone to put the gun down or whatever it is, or knock it out of their hand. I can do something very quickly to intervene. And God is intervening through our conscience. And I always wondered, is that enough? And so I think two examples come to mind that a mistake I was making. I realized I was making a mistake. So I'll talk about that first. And the mistake I was making is kind of looking at me and my children always being young, and me being right beside them the whole time, being able to take the sticks out of their hands and being able to stop them from running out into the road or pushing their brother and sister. Not realizing, to follow the metaphor, my kids are going to grow up. They're going to have all the free will and autonomy that you can imagine when they become young adults, and they're going to be free to do anything they want. And so I started to think of things like my son being 13 years old now and having already discussions about him wanting, thinking about how cool it's going to be to drive. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be cool to drive. There's a lot of responsibility. And so we have talks about things like not drinking and driving, following the speed limit, wearing your seatbelt, making sure everyone in the car and yourself is safe. We've had talks about things like when you start to spend time with significant others, maybe you fall in love with a girl someday, and now you have to respect her physical boundaries and her emotional boundaries and things like that. And starting to realize that I won't be there in those moments when he's doing those things. When he takes the car keys from me and jumps in the car and drives out of the driveway, I'm no longer sitting right beside him saying, follow the speed limit, put on your seatbelt, make sure you don't have anything to drink. I have to trust that the conversations we had and the things I tried to teach to him, that he'll recall those, remember those, and respect them, and act on those things when he's in these situations. And I think God does the same thing. God gives us that freedom, and he gives us that autonomy to go out into the world and act. And he speaks to us through our conscience. As St. Paul says, The law is written on our hearts and our conscience bears witness. And so God is always trying to prevent murder and rape and terrorism and any crime you can imagine through the pangs of our conscience. And if I ask the question, well, God, is that enough? It's almost like God's saying to me, well, do you think it's enough? Because you're not going to be beside your children every time they go out into the world and do things. Do you think it's enough that you're able to speak to them and try to teach them, and you hope that they'll do the right things when they're left to themselves? If you think that's enough, maybe I think that's enough too. So God is basically saying, just as you have to trust that your kids, when they go out into the world and you give them the car keys to go off for a drive, you hope that they won't drink. And just as you have to trust that if they're spending time with their significant other, that they'll respect those boundaries and that they won't do anything in their life to harm other people or themselves. God's saying, I have to do the same thing. I've done the same thing. I have to trust that you're going to go out into the world and that the law I've written on your heart is going to guide you and you're going to listen to it. And God's also saying that just as I have the potential experience of having one of my children not follow what I've taught them, not listen to their conscience, not respect people, or maybe choose to hurt someone or choose to do something that could drastically change their life or someone else's. God's saying, I've taken the same risk. And I think that's what I've learned about reflecting on this question is I allow the same autonomy to my children and also accept the risk and really hope that they're going to listen to that law that's written on their heart and that they're going to choose wisely. And so with that, I want to read the questions because I think the questions, again, will kind of tie this all in and hopefully make some sense. So reflect on the many ways you allow your children moral autonomy and what the potential positive and negative consequences could be. So that's just what I just talked about. Think about that. How many ways that if they're young, maybe it's not yet, but as they grow older, think of all the things you're basically going to metaphorically hand them the keys and trust that they're going to do the right thing. Number 2, do you think you could prevent every wrong decision or wrong action in your children's lives? And I think that we can't do it as parents. We know that. We could never prevent every wrong action or choice. And yet we're still expecting God to do the same thing that we can't do ourselves. Number 3, do you feel, without taking away our free will. So yes, he could do it just like I could do it. I could sit beside my children and make sure they don't do anything ever wrong in their life, and make sure they don't ever lie, cheat, steal, harm. But I'd have to be right beside them the whole time. So would God. So number 3, do you feel God intervenes through conscience? And if so, is it enough of an intervention? That's kind of the crux of the whole video. God definitely intervenes through our conscience and the law written on our hearts. Is it enough? Do you feel it's enough? Number 4, describe how you would have God handle things differently. Would this change the outcome of developing true moral responsibility and virtue? So I've tried to think of this many ways. Is there a better way playing God? Is there a better way, a better world I could come up with, a better way to run things? And if I did come up with that, what would it look like? Do you think you could come up with something that would be better than the way God's allowed it? And if you do come up with an idea, does it limit the way morals and virtue kind of develop? So that's the video for today. So definitely comment below. Again, I want to join the discussion. So links for the previous videos will be in the description below also. And join us for the next video. Thanks.